In 1888, a man filmed what may have been the first motion picture in history. Days later, he boarded a train in France and vanished without a trace. Nobody, no explanation, and yet the story of cinema continued under a different name, Thomas Edison. Coincidence? Today we're going to take this story apart and look at the evidence that suggests it might not be. When people speak about the invention of film, they usually mention Thomas Edison in the United States and the Lumiere brothers in France. These names are repeated so often that they have almost become unquestioned. They form a clean, simple narrative. A handful of brilliant men from both sides of the Atlantic invent a new medium, and the modern world begins. But history is rarely that tidy, because there is another name almost completely absent from that story that complicates it in a very serious way: Louis Le Prince. And there is a compelling argument that he created a working motion picture camera before Edison ever patented his own. To understand this story, you only need one thing. The late 19th century was obsessed with movement. Photography had already learned how to freeze a moment, but that created a new question. Could you capture life as it actually unfolds? One famous attempt to answer that came from a bet. In 1877, the former governor of California, Leland Stanford, wanted to know if a galloping horse ever lifts all 4 legs off ground at once. The human eye couldn't tell, so he hired the photographer, Edwin Muybridge. Muybridge set up a row of cameras triggered one after another as the horse ran past. Each camera captured a slightly different moment in time. When you look at those images one by one, you see the horse mid-run. But when they are placed in a sequence and then rotated on a simple device, something new happens. The horse appears to move. And yes, it also proves that at one point it lifts completely off the ground. It was a small breakthrough, but changed everything, because once people saw that movement could be recreated from images, the goal became obvious. Not separate frames, but real motion. In other words, cinema. Into this moment stepped Louis Le Prince. He was born in France in 1841 into a family closely connected to the origins of photography. His father was a friend of Louis Daguerre, so he grew up around the earliest experiments with capturing images. He later studied art in Paris and then chemistry and physics in Leipzig, combining visual instinct with technical understanding. That combination was rare, and it mattered. He moved to England, married an artist named Lizzie, and built a successful business in Leeds, applying photographic images to ceramics and metal. Their work reached high-level clients, including circles connected to Queen Victoria. Le Prince was not struggling. He was established, respected, and financially stable, which makes what happens next much harder to explain. Like many of his time, Le Prince became obsessed with that one question: how do you capture movement? His first attempt used 16 lenses to take rapid sequences of images. It worked, but the result was unstable. So he simplified the system. He moved to a single lens and used a continuous strip of light-sensitive material, capturing images one after another on the same medium. This created something new. Not just photographs, but motion. On October 14, 1888, he tested it. He filmed a short scene in a garden. People walking, turning, alive in time. Today this is known as Roundhay Garden Scene, and it is widely considered the earliest surviving motion picture. He filmed a few more short scenes. By modern standards, they are simple, but they are unmistakably films. Le Prince knew what he had built. He wrote to his wife that he planned to take it to the United States, demonstrate it, and patent it. He was about to change everything. Before leaving for America, he decided to visit his family in France. So he went to Dijon, where he spent several days with his brother Albert. By all accounts, everything was normal. He seemed optimistic, focused, and full of plans. Albert accompanied him to the train station and personally saw him board a train bound for Paris. They spoke briefly through the window before the train departed. Le Prince was expected in Paris, yet he never arrived. He disappeared somewhere between Dijon and Paris. Nobody was found. No luggage was recovered. The documents related to his invention, which he had been carrying with him, also vanished. The investigation produced no clear answer. There was no evidence of an accident, no confirmed crime, and no explanation that satisfied those who knew him. Several possibilities were considered. The image of him taking his life seemed unlikely, given his circumstances and state of mind. Voluntary disappearance also lacked a convincing motive. Suspicion briefly fell on his brother, but no evidence supported that theory, which leaves another possibility, that his disappearance was connected to his invention. At this point, one uncomfortable question appears. Louis Le Prince disappeared. Who benefited? Because in history, that is often the simplest place to start. And here, the answer is not abstract. It has a very specific name: Thomas Edison. Edison is usually presented as one of the great geniuses of modern history, and to be fair, he was extraordinarily productive. He was also a businessman, and a very aggressive one. He didn't just invent things, he controlled them. He built what we would now call an invention factory, employing teams of engineers whose work was often patented under his name. And he defended those patents relentlessly, taking competitors to court whenever they came too close. In the later part of his life, litigation became almost a defining feature of his career. This matters because it tells you something about how he operated. Edison was not just interested in innovation, he was interested in dominance. Now place that next to the timeline. In 1888, Louis Le Prince builds a working motion picture camera and films moving images. Shortly after that, he disappears. For the next 7 years, he is not declared dead, only missing, which creates a very specific legal situation. His patents are effectively frozen. His family cannot use them, cannot commercialize the invention, and cannot bring it to the market. The technology exists, but it is locked. And during that exact window, Edison moves forward. He patents the kinetoscope, begins commercial exploitation, and establishes himself as the central figure in the birth of cinema. By the time Le Prince is officially declared dead, the narrative is already fixed. Cinema belongs to Edison. Now, on its own, this could be coincidence, but there are details that make it harder to dismiss so easily. Le Prince's behavior shortly before his disappearance was unusual for an inventor of his time. So instead of immediately securing his position in the United States, where patent law was far more favorable, he chose to patent his camera in Britain and France. According to his wife, Lizzie, he feared that his invention could be stolen. In other words, he was already thinking in terms of industrial espionage. Then he disappeared, not gradually, not ambiguously, but completely. He vanished between two cities on a direct journey, along with the documents that would have secured his priority in the United States. Another key detail comes from one of Edison's lawsuits. His own engineer, William Kennedy Laurie Dixon, had worked on the kinetoscope from the start. When he left and started his own film company, Edison sued him, claiming full ownership of the technology. During that trial, Dixon called witnesses, including Le Prince's widow and son. In court, they presented his films and demonstrated that he had a functioning motion picture camera in 1888, before Edison's patent. And this is not just anecdotal. The film itself proves evidence. One of the people visible in the footage, an elderly woman in the garden, died shortly after it was recorded. That allows the date of the film to be established with unusual precision. It cannot be later, it must be earlier. From a modern perspective, that should be decisive. But it isn't. The court doesn't rule in their favor. Edison wins. And the official version of history remains intact. There is one more detail that adds to the unease surrounding this story. Le Prince's son, who appears in those early films, later dies under unclear circumstances. He was shot when he was alone in the woods. Officially, it is considered an accident or that he died by his own hand. But for his mother, it confirmed something she believed for the rest of her life, that her husband's disappearance was not an accident. Now, it is important to say this clearly. There is no direct evidence that Thomas Edison was involved in the disappearance of Louis Le Prince. No document, no confession, no definitive proof. But what we do have here is a pattern. A man develops a breakthrough technology and is about to secure it in the most important market in the world. He disappears along with the documents to prove that priority. His invention becomes unusable. A powerful competitor establishes dominance. And when the original claim is brought back into light, it fails. That doesn't prove a conspiracy, but it makes coincidence a much more complicated word. And that is where the story becomes uncomfortable. This doesn't prove anything, but it raises a question that is difficult to ignore. You know, stories like this are a part of the reason why I became fascinated with this kind of mysteries. Not just who did something, but what happens when the truth itself disappears and something else quietly takes its place. I came across a case in the art world that felt very similar. An artist with a perfect backstory, a rising market, a reputation built almost overnight, and then someone starts asking questions, and then the whole story begins to unravel. I turned that into a novel, Brut, Scandal in Art Brut. If you're curious, I'll leave a link below. Back to our story. For many years, Louis Le Prince was almost entirely forgotten. But his name has begun to return. His films are studied again, and his role in the early history of cinema is being reconsidered. We may never know exactly what happened to him, but we do know this. He built a motion picture camera. He filmed moving images before Edison's work was established, and he disappeared just as he was about to prove it to the world. Which leaves us with a final question. How often does history remember not the person who was the first, but the person who remains? Because it is very difficult to tell the story of cinema honestly without Louis Le Prince.